2 years ago, I traveled through Bali for a month. And before the trip, I wanted to have a very small backpack fitting only necessary things, so I don't have to carry heavy stuff around me all the time. So I got this one. And before I also started this packing list where I added and removed items all the time, and I reviewed it over and over again. And during the trip, I stayed at these bungalows and huts with, like bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, towels, all I needed. And one was actually my favorite accommodation, where the hosts called themselves Papa and Mama Jero. So they literally had parents for a week. And after the trip, I looked very carefully at my backpack while I was unpacking. And even though I had this list, I found items where I was like, okay, I know the medical kit is very important, even though I didn't use it, but why the heck did I pack this? I was so convinced before the trip that I'm gonna need to wear this dress for a party or something to dress up, but actually I didn't end up wearing it because I'm not a big fan of wearing dresses. And for me, it feels like a symbol of an individual being trapped in thinking patterns and doesn't really know what a person needs. So I asked myself over and over again, what do I really need? And back in my apartment, I felt very cramped and I wanted to get rid of things. There's actually a simple method where you can look at something and ask yourself, does that bring me joy? And you're like, nope. And during that time, I also watched a lot of YouTube documentaries about tiny houses. A tiny house is literally just a small self-built house on a trailer, and therefore movable, like this one. This girl traveled around the whole world with that tiny house. And I was so impressed by these little room wonders, where you can slide things up like this, and then you move it around like this, and then actually at the end it kind of transforms into a table. And there were these videos of people being like, welcome to my crib, but they were way cooler than the ones on MTV, to me. I found videos of people building tiny houses that cost around 5,000 to 10,000 euros. So I started calculating. I was like, oh, this is actually the amount of money I pay for rent each year. But the thing with an apartment or a house or something is that as soon as you get kicked out or you stop paying your rent every month, you actually end up with nothing. And instead of taking on a lifelong bank credit to buy my own house or apartment or keep on paying rent each month, I thought, I can just save some money, build a tiny house, and call it my own. And with that dream already in my head, big dream of building a tiny house, I moved to Berlin and I found this event by the Tiny House University. The Tiny House University is an association founded in 2016 by a very well-known architect, some of you might know, Van Boele-Menzel, and other architects, designers, education activists, as well as refugees. And it started as a collective of people being interested in tiny houses and minimalistic living, and also in homeless shelters and refugee shelters and how to build them easily and make them creative. And I was so pumped to meet these people. So I joined one of their first meetings in a cafe in Berlin. And Vavo gave me a pen and a paper and he said, draw your dream house. It shouldn't be bigger than 10 square meters. Very simple instructions. I was like, no, I can't. I don't know how to draw a floor plan. But he pushed me, and eventually I found out that my fear wasn't about drawing a floor plan. Now I know how to do it, it's actually easy. But at that time it was more about not being creative enough, not knowing what I should have in this house, not knowing how big or small things should be. And I looked at all these talented people around me having perfect solutions for their individual needs, and let me overthink my own situation, where I was usually very satisfied and content with the circumstances I found in my old apartments, and I kind of adapted to it. But this time it was in my hands to create my personal, very individualized living space for myself. And it's not just a room. It's a bathroom, it's a kitchen. While I was only thinking of my own consumption in terms of stuff I buy, I switched my focus to resources I consume every day. And now I want to talk about something no one likes to talk about. It's actually about the product we humans produce after we eat. I found this interesting university study where they calculated that the amount of feces a person produces each year is around 50 liters. You can see in the brown bucket. And the amount of urine a person produces each year is around 500 liters. You can see in the green bucket. And we use 6,000 to 25,000 liters of fresh water to flush it away. And that is an insane waste of resources, because actually as soon as you separate the feces from the urine, you can create fertilizers for agriculture, very rich soils for plants, as well as biogas. But instead we produce gray water. Makes sense, right? So these are all things you kind of have to take into account when constructing a house. You have to think about, how do I want to design these systems? What materials are we going to use? How much energy or water do we need? So I want to show you some of my early floor plans, because 1 year later, I found myself in a team where we were all inspired by the creator-to-creator philosophy. It's actually just about that every product we produce should have its own life cycle, and if we put it out there, we kind of have to see how can we get it back into that cycle. And we were inspired by that philosophy and ending up building a house. 4 people building the Holy Foods House. The Holy Foods House is a self-sufficient tiny home with a public food-sharing shelf, a Verteiler. It's a community hub to share food, because actually in Germany, each year, 50% of eatable food gets thrown away due to aesthetic policies and marketing reasons, and we wanted to bring awareness to these issues. So on one side, we created and organized weekly public dinners where we cooked with that food coming from supermarkets and bakeries, and volunteers picking them up and bringing that to our little shelf outside. And then on the other hand, we created that house being a whole sustainable cycle, a closed one, where we implemented systems like solar panels you can see on the outside, and infrared heating, and a shower loop system, which uses 90% less water than a conventional shower. And while experiencing how people can easily create their own living space within like 3 months, I also learned a lot about how conventional houses are designed, how we use materials that cannot be recycled, that actually are unhealthy, make us sick, like carpets or other things. And also I learned a lot about how neighborhoods and cities are designed. And please don't get me wrong, I really love cities. I mean, I live in Berlin, and I just love the vibrant lifestyle, people coming together, good food, good parties, great enthusiasm, motivation, especially in Berlin, where all the startup scene is. And still, we have so many problems. If you live in a city, you can experience all of them up close. You see people living on the streets, people living in apartments that almost fall apart, people getting kicked out of their apartments because they can't afford them anymore due to gentrification and other reasons, friends searching for apartments for ages, new shops every 100 meters with stuff we apparently need, and neighborhoods that get totally wiped out to make space for new hotels and shopping centers, and big properties being completely left alone in nice areas, totally unused, just because investors sit on them. And it's sad, I know. It's actually all these needs of people and the challenges we are facing kind of seem that they don't matter too much. Millennials nowadays pay up to 50% of their income for housing. And it's not about, the city playing in politics is kind of not about creating affordable, healthy, beautiful space. It's not about a city that makes you creative, lets you take over space and meet your neighbors. The city playing in politics is pretty much in the hands of a few, and it's mostly about money. And it kind of seems like there's nothing we can do. But I think the key is to come up with answers and solutions ourselves, to be prepared as soon as we get the chance and someone asks us, that we know how we want to live and what we need. So the Tiny House University did some research on that, because we believe that housing can be way more than the options we have at the moment. And we wanted to challenge existing neighborhood concepts, so we came up with our own. Actually, the Bauhaus Museum Berlin gave up that space in front of the museum to create a new social neighborhood, and we call it the Bauhaus Campus. It's an experiment ground for innovative social research, and we wanted to challenge existing neighborhood concepts, as I said, and come up with new ideas. Our goal was to have these new concepts where our only tools were architecture and the simple belief that diversity makes a village stronger than common sense. So far, we've got 13 tiny houses on that ground, and they all address different problems within societies and cities. And we thought it's the easiest to do it in a small space, because actually a tiny house gives you the opportunity to take your personal interests into account, like the creator-to-creator philosophy. I know the tiny houses are still not perfect, but what the Tiny House University really taught me was that we, the people, can actually change the city and can actually change how we want to interact and how we want to, see our neighbors and interact with our neighbors. And also that cities are going to change. So for example, we invented the 100-year apartment, which is a model of an affordable apartment in a big house with a lot of community area and shared space. The Café Grundeinkommen invented a new stable digital currency based on blockchain technology and paired with the universal basic income. And we're testing that right now on the campus. We invented tiny townhouses that can be placed next to each other, like in a street, or ones that can be stacked on top of each other. And we're also working on other concepts of new urban housing. A startup found a potential of unused space on top of the city. Berlin alone has space for 55,000 apartments on top of its roofs. And Kevin Spacey wants to conquer these roofs and put small, sustainable, smart cabins on top of them to create new living space that is flexible and easily accessible through technology. And we got a lot of press through these projects. Journalists asking me, so is this the solution for everyone? I was like, thank you so much. I feel so honored that you think I just found a solution for 4 billion people. But no, actually, I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all. I think people will still have different needs and interests, and society puts all these thinking patterns on us. Why should we even think in square meters? Is this really important to us? Why don't we calculate the price per light stream or airflow? But actually, I think there's just one big question, which is, how do we want to live in the future? And I want to leave this question with you as an inspiration, because it's also up to you. If you want to change the picture of the city, we have to start doing it, starting with us, because cities are what we make out of them. Thank you.